Hi, this is Camelia. Today I'm going to give my presentation about Monk Eastman, and I will compare the deviation on Burgess text and other sources. I have four main thesis statements, including the racism, the extreme rhetoric, fabrication, and plagiarism. First, let's look at the racism. In A Universal History of Farming, Burgess described Monk Eastman as a storming underworld character who is a Jew. However, the evidence the writer used for this was ambiguous, that he only mentioned Monk is the son of the owner of a kosher restaurant, where the men have rabbinical birds and use special rituals for slaughtering and cleaning cattle. One thing to note here, when Burgess mentioned this point, he added the phrase, "Oddly enough." It shows the contrast between Monk's real image and the imagination in Burgess' mind. And by reading this phrase, we can learn that Burgess believes Monk is a Jew, but not a typical Jew image, because he has some qualities which is different from most Jews in people's mind. And the picture I found here is in Hanson's book. It depicted the environment the monk grew up in. However, according to Hanson, Monk's race is uncertain. Some people treat him as an Irish, while some people think he was a Jew. However, the author states that it was a trick Monk used to conceal his origin and the tracks, since there is an evidence shows his parents are American-born, who were born before Jews immigrated. While in primary source, Burgess used the Gun of New York. The author of this book is Asbury. He mentioned the monk's family runs a Jewish restaurant, but he shied away to directly point out the monk's race, which seems like a purposeful misguide. In common belief, there are many stereotypes against Jewish people, superseding the critical judgment, like intelligent but inferior and docile and so on. In my opinion, Burgess used the example of Monk to help to break the stereotype of Jewish characteristics. And by exploring the Burgess' personal experience, I found the inner correlation between Burgess and the Jew. He has a great fascination with Jewish culture. From his poems, articles, he covers various aspects of Jewish culture and history, like his poem, Israel. He expressed his kinship to Jewish state, and he also explains that he thinks his passion for Jewish culture comes from his English grandma, because she is a reader of Bible. So Burgess grew up in a biblical environment as well as a Jewish environment. And in the 19th century, a large number of Jewish immigrants from Central Europe came to America. As outsiders with a history of condemnation by Christianity and the science of race, they were often treated unfairly. Also, the anti-Semitism was raised, but Burgess clearly rejects such xenophobic nations, which has been revealed in his words. Also, he has no racism against Jewish nation, but we can still find this racism reflected by society in his text. Also, Burgess has no racism against Jewish nation. We can still find the racism reflected by society in his text. And the next point is about the extreme rhetoric, the hyperbole. Burgess described Monk as a costly man, which indicated that he was very strong and high, while according to Rockaway, he stood only 5 feet and 5 inches. He was never weighted more than 150 pounds. And Asbury also gave a similar idea. Thus, it refers to a rhetoric function of exaggeration. In addition, Burhurst described monk as a capital of an important word during the election. However, according to Freud, he and his monk only played a function of offering the vote, so the role of monk shouldn't be defined as any captain of a region. It was exaggerated, and the authenticity of important as well as his influence has not been proved. On the one hand, the exaggeration helps to emphasize one point and make it more remarkable, and the exaggeration based on his appearance as well as his impact add the interestingness of literature because it contributes to a legendary figure, help to attract more readers. Also, Monk is a negative image, but he rarely has some character that only appear in fantasy, like the masculine, his free individuality, as well as the courage and the boldness, leadership to some extent. On the other hand, it shows the Burhurst style is not the plain language but the language of fantasy and humor. Besides, the exacerbated language on guns reflects the horror and the fear of citizens brought by guns. The another rhetoric is irony. According to Burhurst, the monk life is ended with the surprising shooting without any reason, and he also mentions there was a happy creature, the cat, without perception of death by his side. He used relatively easy language to describe his death, and the happy cat and the dead man made two different atmospheres. It can better reflect the tragic state of his death, while Rockaway emphasized more on Monk's true death situation. He was shot and killed by a corrupt prohibition agent. Freud pointed out that Monk was killed by a rival bootlegger. So these two writers give a more detailed description on his death. But Burhurst only used dramatic way to write the throwaway ending of Monk. It is very curt and hasty. And about the fabrication, Burhurst described Monk and his monk as hero in the Battle of Rivington Street. Hero is a positive and good word, but this battle is not a good or positive thing. Hanson and Asbury both define this war as bloody gun shootout, which caused a great injury and death. It reveals the conflict between two guns. And last, about plagiarism. According to Burhurst, Monk is a storming underworld character who is merciless as well as bloodthirsty, who had worked for the public dance halls as a bouncer. But Burhurst mentions that Monk once, in order to prove his capability, wiped the floor with two men can first. But Burhurst used this idea begin with the story is told, without any mention of source in the end. I find this idea was picked from a weekly or news. The picture is here, the newspapers. So I think he is plagiarized in this point. In conclusion, I compare the Burhurst work on Monk Eastman with other 6 sources, with Macy's statement of his racism, extreme rhetoric, fabrication, plagiarism. So that's all for today's presentation. Thank you for listening.